The smell of antiseptic burned my throat as I stood frozen in the hallway, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone. The sterile white lights above me felt like they were buzzing straight into my skull. I watched through the glass window as machines beeped frantically, tubes running into my little girl's arms, her small chest rising and falling like she was fighting for each breath. "Please," I whispered to no one, gripping my jacket tighter around me. "Please, just let her be okay." And then I heard the voice I dreaded most, my mother's. She walked into the ICU hallway like she owned the place, my sister Emily right behind her, the same permanent smirk plastered on her face. Mom's heels clicked against the tile floor as if she was arriving at some glamorous event, not a hospital where her own granddaughter was fighting for life. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video. "Doctor," she said sharply before I could even react, "how long are you planning to waste resources on this?" The doctor looked up startled. "Ma'am, she's in critical condition. We're doing everything we can to stabilize her." Mom's lips curled into a sneer. "Stabilize her? Save her daughter?" She pointed at me like I was gum stuck to her shoe. "No, trash doesn't need treatment." The words hit me like a physical slap. I couldn't breathe for a second, the buzzing of the lights roaring louder in my ears. Even the nurses froze where they stood, their faces twisting with disbelief. "Mom," I whispered hoarsely, stepping forward, "she's your granddaughter." She laughed bitterly. "Don't try to guilt me, Harper. You made your bed. You chose to ruin your life, drop out of college and have that child with some deadbeat no one remembers. Don't you dare act like we owe you anything now." Emily chuckled behind her, leaning casually against the wall. "Honestly, Harper, maybe this is the universe trying to do your kid a favor, spare her from growing up like her mother." I felt my nails dig into my palms until I thought they'd break skin. The hallway felt like it was tilting, everything spinning around me. "She's 5 years old," I choked out. 5, and you're standing here wishing her dead? "Don't twist my words," Mom snapped. "I'm saying it's pointless. ICU treatments cost money. She doesn't deserve to drain anyone's pockets when she's going to end up like you anyway. It's called being realistic." The doctor cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Ma'am, this is a private matter between the patient's guardian and the medical team." "She's not her guardian," Mom cut in coldly, staring right at me. "Not where it counts. We raised Harper. We gave her everything, and this is how she repaid us, by throwing her life away. You think she can make medical decisions? She's incompetent." I turned to the doctor, trembling, tears spilling hot down my cheeks. "Don't listen to her. I'm the only parent. Everything goes through me." Emily let out a laugh so sharp it felt like glass shattering in my chest. "Parent? You? You can't even keep a roof over your kid's head without begging us for help every few months." I swallowed hard, biting back the words clawing up my throat. I wanted to scream, to tell them both to leave, to never show their faces again, but the machines behind the glass reminded me what mattered right now. My little girl needed me calm. Mom tilted her head, mocking concern. "You know what would have saved us all trouble, Harper? If you'd just given her up when she was born like we told you to. You're not built for this." I couldn't hold back anymore. My voice cracked as I shouted, "Get out!" A few nurses glanced over, startled, but none of them stepped in. Mom didn't move. She folded her arms, staring me down like she'd won. "You'll regret this," she said evenly. "You always do." And then, slowly, she turned on her heel and strutted down the hallway, Emily trailing behind her with one last look of disgust. I stood there, my breath shaking, watching their shadows disappear around the corner, and in that silence, something in me shifted. I wasn't going to beg them for love anymore. I wasn't going to explain myself. But as I looked through the glass at my little girl fighting for her life, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. They were going to pay for every word, every sneer, every time they called us trash. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. I wiped my tears, squared my shoulders, and walked back into the ICU room, taking her tiny hand in mine. "Hang on, baby," I whispered, my voice steady now. "Mama's got you, and Mama's done being their punching bag." I didn't know it yet, but that night in the hospital would be the last time my mother or Emily ever had power over me. I was going to take it back, and when I did, their faces would go pale, just like the title promised. I woke up the next morning on the stiff vinyl couch in my daughter's ICU room, my neck aching, my body buzzing from exhaustion. The machines still beeped steadily, and her little chest rose and fell under the thin hospital blanket. The nurse entered quietly, holding a clipboard. "She made it through the night," she whispered, smiling softly. "She's stable now." My knees almost buckled with relief. "Thank you," I breathed, clutching my daughter's tiny hand, but even that relief was short-lived. When I stepped out into the corridor to grab some coffee, I saw my mother and Emily sitting in the waiting area, sipping lattes like this was a casual brunch. My stomach churned. Emily looked up first, smirking. "Oh, look who's still here. Thought they'd have kicked you out by now." I clenched my jaw and walked past them without a word, but Mom wasn't done. She leaned back in her chair and said loudly enough for the whole floor to hear, "It's pathetic, Harper, begging for scraps of medical attention for a kid who won't make it anyway." The words echoed off the sterile walls, slicing straight through me. A few people glanced over. I hated how small I felt under her gaze, but this time, instead of shrinking away, something in me hardened. I didn't reply. I didn't cry. I didn't give them the satisfaction. Instead, I made a silent promise to myself. I was going to take back control. Later that day, when the doctor came to discuss billing and next steps, Mom tried to step in again. "She can't afford this," she said coldly. "Send her to a public ward. Let's not waste resources here." The doctor frowned. "Ma'am, unless you're the legal guardian—" "She doesn't know what's best for that child," Mom snapped. "We raised Harper. We know what—" "That's enough," I cut in, my voice shaking but firm. I handed the doctor my ID and insurance documents. "Everything goes through me. Don't speak to them about my daughter ever again." Mom's face twisted into something dark. Big words for someone who came crawling to us last month, begging for rent money. Her words burned, but I refused to react. I turned my back and walked back into the ICU, ignoring Emily's laughter following me down the hall. That night, as I sat by my daughter's bed, scrolling through my phone to distract myself, I stumbled upon something, an old email thread between my parents and an attorney. It was about my grandmother's estate. She had left behind a trust fund, a significant one, and by the terms it was supposed to be split evenly between her grandchildren, me, and Emily. But in the email, I saw my mother's message. "Harper doesn't deserve a cent. Draft whatever papers you need to redirect her share into Emily's name. She'll never fight it." My hands trembled, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was fury. They'd stolen from me, and now, as my daughter fought for her life, they had the audacity to call her trash. I started digging deeper. That night, I requested copies of every document tied to my grandmother's estate. It wasn't easy. I had to call old contacts, email attorneys, and search through online court records, but by sunrise, I had what I needed. It turned out my grandmother had left me enough money to cover my daughter's treatment 10 times over. Money my parents had been enjoying for years while leaving me to struggle, scrape by, and beg. I sat there in the cold glow of my phone screen, my heart pounding. I didn't just want the money back. I wanted their world to collapse around them. The next day, I visited the hospital's billing department. "Run every expense through my account," I told them calmly, sliding over the paperwork showing my legal right to my inheritance. Within hours, I secured my grandmother's trust back in my name, every cent, but I didn't stop there. I filed a fraud claim with the attorney who'd drafted the original will, exposing how my parents had manipulated legal documents to siphon my inheritance. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I just let the evidence speak for itself. When the attorney called them later that evening, I sat across from my daughter's hospital bed, holding her hand, listening to the voicemail notification ping on my mother's phone in the hallway. The muffled sound of Mom's panicked voice carried down the hall. Emily's shrill protests followed. I smiled for the first time in weeks. But that was just the beginning. While they scrambled to deal with fraud investigations and frozen accounts, I made another move. I called the hospital's billing office again, requesting a meeting with administration, and I made sure to invite my parents, too. When they arrived, dressed up like they owned the place, expecting to control me again, I handed the administrator a signed statement. "Hey, effective immediately," I said, my voice calm but loud enough for the entire office to hear. "My parents have no medical authority, no financial power, and no right to interfere with my daughter's care. Permanently." The administrator nodded and had security escort them out of the hospital. The look on Mom's face as 2 guards flanked her was something I'll never forget, the frozen, pale fury of a woman who'd just realized she'd lost control forever. Emily hissed at me as she passed. "You'll regret this, Harper." I didn't even blink. "You already do," I said softly. I thought that would be enough, but it wasn't. What came next, that was the part they never saw coming. The day my daughter opened her eyes again was the same day I decided to end the war they had started. She blinked at me slowly, confused by the tubes and machines around her, and whispered in her fragile, broken voice, "Mom, am I gonna be okay?" I kissed her forehead, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Yes, baby. You're gonna be okay." But deep down, I knew something had shattered inside me, something I couldn't put back together. 2 weeks later, I planned everything with precision. I didn't want chaos, I wanted silence. Not the quiet of surrender, but the quiet of devastation, the kind where every sound echoes because their entire world has been stripped away. I'd discovered more than I thought possible when I dug into my grandmother's estate. Hidden beneath their fraud and manipulation was something they'd been terrified I'd never find. Ownership records of the very house they lived in. My grandmother had left it jointly to me and Emily. They'd been living there for years without ever putting my name on the documents, thinking I'd never notice. I noticed. One Saturday morning, I walked up the driveway of the house I grew up in, the one where I had been called trash for as long as I could remember. I had a set of keys now, delivered to me directly by the courts after the trust transfer was finalized. I didn't knock. I opened the door, stepping inside like a ghost returning to haunt them. Mom was in the kitchen, laughing over breakfast. Dad sat at the table, scrolling his phone. Emily perched like a queen at the counter. They looked up, and the laughter died. "What are you doing here?" Mom spat, slamming her coffee mug on the table. I didn't answer. I walked silently to the center of the living room and set a single white envelope on the glass coffee table. Emily frowned, reaching for it, but Dad snatched it first and ripped it open. His face went pale. The eviction notice fluttered to the floor. "You can't do this," he said, his voice cracking for the first time in my life. "This is our house." I finally spoke, my voice steady but soft. "Grandma thought so too, but it isn't. Not anymore. You stole my inheritance, tried to erase my name, called my daughter trash. Now you get to pack like trash." I thought Mom would scream, but she didn't. She just stared at me, the color draining from her face. Emily wasn't as graceful. She leapt to her feet, shouting curses, demanding I take it back. I didn't. Instead, I walked to my old bedroom door, opened it slowly, and let the silence fill the space between us. The room was empty. They'd given it to Emily years ago, ripping down my childhood posters, painting over my walls, throwing away anything with my name on it. Now, it was theirs that would be erased. "You have 7 days," I said simply, turning back toward the door. That night, I drove my daughter past the house one last time. The lights were still on, but inside, chaos had replaced their perfect, curated life. Boxes stacked against the windows, shouting carried into the street. My daughter leaned against me in the passenger seat, still weak but healing, and whispered, "Mom, are we winning?" I brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, smiling softly. We're not winning, baby. We've already won. A week later, I stood at the edge of the driveway as they walked out carrying suitcases, their heads bowed. Mom glanced at me once, just once, her face pale and hollow. There were no insults left. No words sharp enough to pierce through the silence I'd built around myself. As they passed, Emily muttered, "You ruined us." I tilted my head slightly, meeting her eyes. "No, Emily, you ruined yourselves. I just handed you the mirror." They walked away, and for the first time in my life, the house behind me, my house now, was mine in more than just name. Inside, my daughter curled up on the couch, holding the stuffed bunny Grandma had left her in the will they tried to hide. I closed the door slowly, letting the quiet settle like a final verdict. This wasn't loud. It wasn't messy. But it was devastating. And they'd never stop hearing the echo of it. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video.